Also in Iowa, but it turns out he made a difference, and perhaps a decisive difference in Florida.
Well, precisely. We've just put these figures together. Nader got 94,000 votes in Florida. That's 1.6% of the overall total. Now, in our exit poll, 8% of the voters in Florida said they made up their minds in the last 3 days who they were going to vote for. 9% of those last-minute voters voted for Ralph Nader. So Nader made the difference. There's no other way to read that.
Well, now, I don't suspect that Ralph Nader will like to have this said, but true or untrue, that if Gore loses this race in the final analysis, if not the vice president himself, his followers, supporters, and campaign managers are going to say, Nader wrecked us.
Well, I think that's absolutely correct.
It turns out not just in Wisconsin and Oregon, which was sort of expected, and in Iowa, Nader got a substantial turnout, although Gore turned out to win the state. And now in Florida, it could be the difference for Gore.
Well, I think we'd make a mistake if we said every vote that was cast for Ralph Nader was a vote that would have gone to Al Gore. Surely some of those people would have voted for George Bush. They're just kind of anti-establishment kind of people. But I also think it's probably true that Ralph Nader took more votes away from Al Gore than he did from George Bush. So I think you can say in this election, Nader had a lot to do with what happened.
Well, like it or not, and we know they like it not, the Gore people can read it and weep when it comes to Nader's tallies. Now, we're going to take a break, but before we do so, review where we are. In the electoral vote, in the electoral college vote, 270 needed to win. Gore has 260, having picked up Wisconsin within the last hour. Bush has 246, but even though Oregon 7 are still out, it gets down to Florida, and Bush leads in Florida by about the difference is 1/30th of 1%, keeping in mind that Nader got about 1.6% of the total vote in Florida. That's why the Gore people are going to be wincing when they hear that. In the overall national vote totals, Gore leads by a substantial amount. We say substantial amount. It's still very, very close, and still within the area of possibility that Bush could win the overall national vote. But Gore has surged out front in that and has been there for a couple of hours. So we have this situation where the electoral college vote could go to George Bush, and the overall national vote could go to Al Gore. Dan Rather at CBS News election headquarters in New York. Going to take a break. Don't go away. We'll be right back with you.
When we asked some denture wearers why they don't use an adhesive, they didn't have a whole lot to say.
I don't need it. My dentures fit fine, thanks.
I've not had a problem in 15 years.
But then they tried Fix-It-Dent, and they couldn't say enough.
Makes them feel a lot more natural.
I just plain forget I have them.
They actually fit better.
That's because Fix-It-Dent gives even the best fitting dentures a better fit.
It just proves you never know until you try.
Fix-It-Dent, and forget it.
Isn't stuffing great with Butterball turkey?
Wish we could have it more often.
Now you can. Introducing the holiday stuffing for all 365 days. New genuine Butterball stuffing. Make it any way you like. In a bird, the oven, on the stove, or in the microwave. Add Butterball broth and it's even tastier. Discover savory, slow-cooked holiday flavor tonight.
Like a holiday. Without all the relatives.
And without all the work.
For stuffing, broth, and gravy that make any meal holiday special, the best of all is Butterball.
You get 1 minute every morning. 1 minute when your goals are all within your reach. You push forward knowing nothing will hold you back. Introducing new Minute Maid Premium Low Acid Orange Juice. With less citric acid, you'll have the freedom to enjoy. New Minute Maid Premium Low Acid. It's the Minute Maid to squeeze the day.
Interest in the Yellow Pages? Falling? Now there's something better. Switchboard.com, a free directory powered by the internet. It's business listings, it's people search, it's maps and directions, locally and nationally. So before you pick up a Yellow Pages, drop in on us instead. Switchboard.com. Think outside the book.
Friday, the fugitive becomes a hostage. You want me? You'll have to kill me. And you'll never guess what happens next. All new Fugitive. Then, the victim of the perfect murder
I urged his bones. What a rush.
is about to get justice.
Who are you?
An all-new CSI. And they survive the island.
Hey, neighbor.
But can these castaways survive a night with Nash? An all-new Nash after The Fugitive and CSI, CBS Friday.
Dan Rather with Ed Bradley, Bob Schieffer, Leslie Stahl, Gloria Borgia, and Anthony Mason back at CBS News election headquarters in New York. It remains tick tight. It has been for virtually the whole night and now into the wee hours of the morning, and we go into the dawn of a second day. In the Electoral College, 270 needed to win. Gore has 260, having picked up Wisconsin in the last hour and a half. Bush has 246, but Bush has a lead of about 1,760 some odd votes in Florida. That's a difference of 1/30th of 1% out of 6 million votes cast. But a 1-vote margin is enough for Bush if it stands up, because he who wins Florida wins the presidency. Bush has had a lead in Florida for a long time. If you went to bed last night and you thought that Bush had won the presidency, that's because at one time Bush's margin in Florida was 50,000 votes or so, and everybody, almost by a total agreement, said, well, Bush is going to win it. So it was, having earlier been in the Gore column, went to the Bush column, but has now been pulled back into the undecided column. But Bush does continue to lead in Florida. A recount has been ordered by the state attorney general in Florida, not because he thinks any irregularities. Of course, they'll investigate any possibility of irregularities, but because under Florida law, if the margin is 1/2 of 1% or below, and this is way below that, then Florida law, in the opinion of the attorney general, mandates a recount. So what they've done, they've let some of the poll workers go back to home and go to bed. Some of them now have been rousted out of bed. They're going to get themselves together there in Florida. They're going to arrange for this recount. The recount, no one is kidding anybody. It could take hours. It could be 8 or 9 o'clock tonight before we know the outcome. Could be even longer than that, because there's a complicating factor of absentee ballots that were shipped overseas, and those absentee ballots have a few days to get in, quite a few days in fact, and so we'll just have to see how this whole situation goes. We'll show you the overall electoral map. Very interesting situation is developed. Gore with 260, Bush with 246 in the Electoral College, 270 needed to win. Oregon with 7 electoral votes is still undecided. Bush leads in Oregon, but it isn't going to matter. If Bush wins in Oregon but loses Florida, he doesn't become president. Even if Gore wins Oregon and loses Florida, he doesn't become president. Florida is the whole shebang. 25 electoral votes. Now, everything in red, all states in red, have been carried by George Bush. Those where it's blinking red and going pink, and that includes Nevada, Arizona, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia are all states that were carried by the Democrats in the 1996 presidential race, but this time have gone Republican. As you can see, there's much more red on the map than there is blue. However, Gore has carried the big population states, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Michigan, to say nothing of California and Washington, and the Electoral College is weighted toward the more populous areas of the country. We have an Electoral College partly to give the sparsely populated areas of the country a substantial say in the election. So while Bush has won more states, considerably more than Gore, the Electoral College lead at the moment is Gore's. But we come back to Florida. If Bush wins Florida, and he leads there now by a minuscule percentage, but nonetheless he leads, if that stands up in the recount, under the rules and under the law, Bush is supposed to become president, and no doubt will, even though Al Gore now has, in the overall national popular vote, a lead over George Bush of about 217,000 votes. Yes, the percentage is the same, but look down on the actual figures. Gore leads Bush by about 217,000 votes in the national popular tally. That means there is a possibility, and right now it's advantage Bush, that Bush could win the Electoral College vote and lose the overall national popular vote. Now, before the election, many Republicans who feared that Bush might win the national vote but lose the Electoral College vote raised the specter of appealing to the Supreme Court and saying, well, that's not fair, and believing and knowing that they have a Republican majority in the Supreme Court, thinking they might win it. Now, nobody in the Bush camp talked that way, certainly not publicly, and I know of no one who spoke that way privately, but some Republicans did. So far, we haven't heard that on the Democratic side, with Al Gore now winning the national overall popular vote count. If that stands up, you may have some grumbling about it. But the law is the Electoral College decides it, and right now, it's close. Gore leads in the Electoral College with 270 needed to win. He has 260. Bush has 246. But, as I say, advantage Bush because he has a lead of about 1,700 plus votes in Florida at the moment. A recount has been ordered. It's going to take hours. The Bush people say they are confident that in the end they're going to win it. And indeed, both history and common sense would tell you they still have a very good chance to win it in the Electoral College. Gloria Borgia has been working this story. Gloria, you have some new information for us?
Yes, I do. I think this story is escalating pretty quickly, Dan. I spoke with a Democratic attorney who had a meeting until the wee hours of this morning with the senior management of the Democratic Party. It seems that they intend to send a large group of attorneys to Florida, somewhere between 100 and 200 lawyers. That is because you have to have lawyers in every single county of the state, everywhere there was what they call a significant counting event. Both candidates have these so-called observers. Second group of lawyers also goes to investigate potential irregularities in the state. This lawyer told me that the Democratic Party knows that it has a huge tactical decision right now because they're going to have people on the ground to observe the process and collect information. But then they're going to have their own individual observers to discover if there are any other grounds on which to challenge this election in the state of Florida. In other words, if they lose the count, they have to make the decision about whether they are going to try and delegitimize the entire election in the state of Florida, whether certain people were thrown away from the polls, et cetera, et cetera. So they have their own investigators. Do they decide to try and go after delegitimizing this election? If they do that, then this would get thrown into the House of Representatives. The lawyers meeting early this morning didn't even know if a judge in the state of Florida would have the authority to declare this election null and void right now. This is kind of the unknowable. All these attorneys are meeting about it, but they know they're going to send this big group down there right away. And the Gore campaign has not decided what to do yet because they haven't had all of these legal options laid out for them, Dan.
Round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. It's all centered on Florida. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back here with you. Don't go away.
I was home, homeward bound. Home, where my thoughts escaping. Home, where my music plays.
New MSN Explorer. Everything you need to feel at home on the web, all in one place. Emotional, complete. That's the Purina Cat Chow way of life.
Recount ordered in Florida. No verdict on the presidency yet. Probably won't be one for at least a number of hours. John Roberts is at Gore headquarters in Nashville. John?
Dan, the vice president is asleep. He's trying to catch up on, I guess he was up for 50 hours before he finally decided to go down for the night. But his team is still up, and they'll be out talking about this in probably the next 10 minutes or so. And I'll tell you, Dan, when you go back and you look at how this evolved, I mean, you couldn't write a movie script that anybody would believe based around this. About 1:30 this morning, based on projections that Mr. Gore was going to lose Florida by about 50,000 votes, he picked up the telephone and he called the Texas governor and said, "I'm conceding the election to you. Congratulations, Governor. I'll soon make it public." And on his way down here to War Memorial Plaza, his field director called one of his aides and said it's not a margin of 50,000 votes. It's more like 60,000 votes. Well, this poor fellow wasn't about to tell the vice president, so he called the campaign chairman, Bill Daley, who then told the vice president, wait a minute, we better hold off on all of this. By the time they got down here, where they were supposed to give the concession speech in front of the crowd, the margin had narrowed to about 1,000 votes. So Bill Daley got on the phone to Don Evans, his opposite number at the Bush campaign, and said, we're not going to concede